Hi everyone, my name is John. Welcome back to my channel. And despite mostly reading history for the past few years, I nevertheless am drawn back and back again to novels, occasionally at least, to sort of, I don't know, reorient myself and give myself something different to read. I don't know. I'm usually drawn to history, but I need fiction in my reading life to diversify it, make it more interesting, you name it. One of the books that I read in January was a book I found at my local library annex. It's an old story on this book channel. I live close to two libraries, both of them have annex slash shops attached to them, and they both sell books that have been donated by patrons or pulled out of circulation. And this was pulled out of circulation because it has the right there. And this is Joan Lindsay's Picnic at Hanging Rock. Apologies for the glare there, but you can get a real sense of time and place by the picture, which I will discuss in a second. But this is the 50th anniversary edition, as you can see up there in the upper, well, here I think it would be left-hand corner, depending on how this gets mirrored. But Joan Lindsay's Picnic at Hanging Rock, one of the classics of Australian literature from the 20th century. This was first published in 1967, and it is kind of a mixture, an odd mixture of different literary forms. It combines elements of the Gothic and mystery and this kind of stark psychological realism against the backdrop of Australia in the year 1900. If you've heard of the novel but haven't read it, the most relevant plot point will probably be the Valentine's Day disappearance from Appleyard College of three girls named Miranda, Irma, and Marion, as well as their mathematics teacher at Hanging Rock, which is a geological formation that the characters visit. One of the girls is eventually discovered alive, but the others are never found and are presumed dead. The usual way of dealing with this in a mystery would be something like investigating what happened, going on a fact-finding mission, and a resolution that allows family members and people at the school to deal with their grief and move on with their lives, right? But if you're looking for the accoutrement of a traditional mystery or thriller, you won't really find them here. Spoiler alert, the events surrounding the disappearance of the girls are never really resolved in any kind of final, definitive way. Instead of sending the reader on a goose chase to find out what happened at Hanging Rock, Joan Lindsay uses the incident to explore a host of social issues around Appleyard College and the members of the surrounding community. In many ways, the disappearance of the girls is just a foil. It's just a kind of an excuse for an exploration of more interesting, at least in my opinion, social and cultural themes that are boiling just under the surface of the book. The incident at Hanging Rock serves as a shock to a community otherwise comfortable in its propriety. What emerges from the girl's disappearance are the ripples when that community finds itself up against the brutal, isolating environment of turn-of-the-century colonial Australia. The girls at Appleyard College are trained in manners and deportment, as were many girls 200 or 120, 130 years ago. And while the headmistress, Mrs. Appleyard, after whom the college is named, employs teachers to instruct in all of the usual subjects, it is abundantly clear that the goal of the finishing school, which is basically what this is to create cookie cutter ladies, cookie cutter young girls who will quietly conform to social mores and standards and be married off. The amount of attention and care and sympathy that the girls at the college get is largely a function of their social status and their wealth and their family background. To no one's surprise, every aspect of the girls' lives is policed and invigilated upon by those around them, mostly men. The perennial problems of puberty and female desire are seen as dangers when they're present and meant to be repressed. Sexuality is never explicitly mentioned, but it is, of course, unavoidable at a school for young girls or young anyone, really. There's a character named Mike Fitzhubert in the book. He's a wealthy Englishman who was picnicking at Hanging Rock the same day the girls disappeared. And he strikes up a relationship with his uncle Coachman, who is a kind of a coarse, unschooled young man, a bit of a commoner maybe, and his name is Alfred Crundle. At first, it's a partnership that is aimed at finding the missing girls, but appears to develop ambiguously, of course, because ambiguity is always a feature and not a bug of the novel, appears to develop into something else, more than just a friendship, and more than just a friendship based on finding the missing girls. Albert, despite his roughness and his gruff, unfinished character, is tender and attentive with Mike. The storytelling often lingers around the way that they touch one another, always in very G-rated ways. Of course, it would have to be in this book. But after Mike's experience at Hanging Rock, Albert becomes not only nurturing towards Mike, but also possessive of him in a very concerning way, actually. One that might make people ask questions about the nature of their relationship. Mike responds by toggling between dependence and a cruelty that tests Albert's devotion. Sometimes it's good to have a little repressed, heated rivalry in with your dressed up finishing school decorum. But that is definitely a subplot that is within the novel, and it's an interesting one to see played out. This very ambiguous relation. I can't imagine it's ambiguous in the eyes of Joan Lindsay, but apparently some people pick up on it more than others. To me, it was very apparent, but yeah. Lindsay's attention to land and landscape is meant to draw a stark contrast between the rigid ways of English life back home in England and the alienating, isolating, indifferent ways of the Australian countryside. Respectability reigns, as do various forms of cultural amnesia and erasure. Even the embodiment of propriety herself, the head of the finishing school, Mrs. Applewood, wears two masks. In public, her punctuality and her moralizing dominate. In private, she is revealed to be a brittle, heartless, vulnerable woman who uses the girls as little more than public-facing pawns for her school. All she thinks of after their disappearance, and again, presumptive death, is how she can save the school's reputation, how she can save face and keep the money flowing into a school, almost like it's some sort of a Ponzi scheme. Lindsay even pokes fun at the idea of punctuality itself by going out of her way to mention that when the girls disappear, the timepieces of people around Hanging Rock all begin to fail. Hanging Rock is alluring and it has a romantic appeal and grip to those who have never been there, much like Australia itself, I guess. Especially during this period, it's this kind of well, I mean, it had been colonized for over a century by 1900, but it was still it had many more unfinished parts than it does today. But it's also where the old ways go, the old English ways go to decay and break down and die. And I think that's one of the core ideas to get from the book. Lindsay's style is ephemeral and impressionistic with deep attention to detail, especially to Australian landscapes, which she clearly pays very close attention to and loves. Described in the first part of the book, where the presence of Hanging Rock looms large and where the girls' disappearances take place. It's written with that really arch, but also very, very funny attention to social detail that reminds me of writers like Susan Glaspell and Edith Wharton to some degree, two other writers who likely felt the need to at least partially code their themes because of prevailing social mores and how those mores wouldn't consider it proper to address them openly. Kind of like the relationship between Mike and Albert, allegedly. Fascinating book. Loved it. Really, really, I enjoyed this a lot more than it was. It's like I said, it's not your typical mystery or thriller. It's not resolved in your typical way. There's a lot more going on here than you might think at first blush. Joan Lindsay's Picnic at Hanging Rock. Definitely something I would recommend if anything in this review sounds interesting to you. And let me know if you have any comments, if you've read it before, if you liked it, hated it. Leave me a comment. I'm always looking for people to talk to on my reviews and book hauls and anything else. So I appreciate anything you have to say, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.